Brady and Belichick have been at the forefront of the credit in New England for the last 20 years.
OTB's American Football Show, The Snap on OTB Sports Radio.
And we're live. You're very welcome along to this week's edition of The Snap. It's Ger Gilroy with you on Fridays talking about the situation in the NFL and whatever is going on in American football. With us as ever, we've got Cian, Fahey and Ronan Mullen. Cian, you're still awake?
No, I managed to get some sleep. I'm not going to say it was a good game, but it was probably the best the NFC has got to offer right now. I'll be honest, Jared, this weekend it's kind of a great prelude to this weekend, because this weekend is one of the best weekends in the NFL, not for any other reason or any people in America, but for us over here, it's perfect because we got an extra hour this week. All the games start at 5, so if you're stuck at home with nothing to do like most of us are right now, it's a great Sunday evening getting the game starting at 5 and ending before midnight. Yeah,
it's actually a ridiculous weekend of television sport. It's starting this evening with the Ireland team up against Ukraine and then Villa hammering Leeds after that. So all is well in the world. We didn't tell anybody the results, so people who are unfamiliar, last night the New York Giants should have, could have and nearly but didn't beat the Philadelphia Eagles, who did eventually win.
Yeah, it was... To be honest with you, it was a poor game for three quarters. It was exactly what we expected. Two teams that are both injured and just lacking in quality. And then it got to 5 minutes left. The Giants had taken a lead. Daniel Jones had a massive run, and even that run was calamitous because he fell over himself despite having no one near him with 30 yards to go to the end zone. He literally had the fourth longest run in Giants history, and it was an embarrassment. Like, that's the way that game went. Like, he fell over himself. So that set up a touchdown. The Giants took an 21-10 lead. 11 points was double what the Eagles had done to that point at all, and they didn't look like scoring at all. The Eagles got a penalty on the start of the next drive. They got a big play that was a blown coverage from the Giants on the back end. Suddenly they're back in the game. They get a touchdown. The Giants have a chance to end the game, to finish it off. Daniel Jones throws a perfect pass to Evan Engram down the sideline, and Evan Engram drops it when he's wide open, which has been the story of Evan Engram's career. He gets open easily. He's a great tight end if he could catch the ball, but he just simply can't catch the ball. And then you come to the end, and even on the final drive, the Eagles are kind of messing up themselves because they push themselves backwards a couple of times until Carson Wentz throws one of the best passes you'll see to Byron Scott, where he has literally the window of the throw into is the size of the ball. So if he is off by any 0.1% of a degree, he's going to be missed. It's going to be an incompletion, but it's a perfect throw, a throw worthy of winning any game. But that game, even Wentz's performance on his own was just slop after slop.
The NFC East standings, still the Cowboys are on top. They're 2-4. I didn't realize that's the Eagles' first win of the season. Is that right?
The
Eagles beat the 49ers. So
the thing I like about it is the 49ers are last in the NFC West, and they would be first in the NFC East.
Yeah, they're 3-3. Sorry, the table I'm looking at hasn't updated yet. So the Eagles are actually 2-4, 2-4-1, which is a half game ahead of the Cowboys, who play Washington at the weekend. So,
but you recall that Doug Peterson was absolutely lambasted for his decision to basically take a tie with the Bengals. But that one, Ger, at the end of that record could prove decisive. I know ESPN projected that the Eagles will win this division with a record of 6-9-1. So that's how lowly it's looking at the moment. I know there is precedent for it in other divisions. The Seahawks got in on a 7-9 before, but 6-9-1 would be pretty paltry.
The Panthers did a couple of years ago as well, I think. The one thing is, right, so they have a lot of injuries. Some of those players are actually going to start getting fit. Some of them aren't. Deshaun Jackson, I think, went off last night with what has been reported as a serious looking injury. I haven't seen an update on it just yet today, but he may well be gone for the rest of the season.
Bad hit.
If Wentz starts to find some form, is it beyond the bounds possibility in this crazy season that getting out of the division into, say, whenever this is played, middle of January, all of February, that actually the whole thing is going to look completely different? It will entirely be down to who is available at that stage.
And you know what else is insane about this? They could wind up playing the Chicago Bears, because the Bears look like they're on track for the playoffs at least. And with the Vikings basically looking like they're giving up in the season, they're pretty much going to be duking it out with the Panthers, and they've got 2 games left against the Vikings. But the Eagles, if they get healthy, but I don't know how healthy they're going to get. Most of those injuries are long-term or season enders or guys completely done. Like it's not like they have people coming back in a couple of weeks. It's not like they have an anticipation of their offensive line getting better over the next couple of weeks. And that's a big concern because Wentz hasn't shown the ability to play behind a below average or a bad offensive line. And the receivers last night, I think the receivers are coming together. Hightower made a big catch last night. He was impressive. Fulgham has made a couple of plays over the last couple of weeks. Deshaun got injured in a punt return. It was a really bad hit and a really late hit, and it got flagged. But I think it should have kind of brewed up a little bit more controversy than it did, a little bit more criticism than it did, because it got brushed past a little bit. It was an awful-looking injury. He's a big loss. Jalen Reagor is gone as well. Zach Ertz was hurt, and he's going to be hurt for the next 2 weeks, and he didn't play last night. And one of the reports that came out before the game was that the Eagles were looking to trade Zach Ertz, which is both a sign of Zach Ertz dropping off a little bit and a sign of where the Eagles think they are with this team right now, because you wouldn't be trading him if, like Ger, you're taking this kind of more optimistic view. Yeah. If the Eagles coaching staff and front office were taking that optimistic view, that talk of Zach Ertz being traded wouldn't be there.
Well, he's obviously on the verge of a holdout at the preseason because he wanted to be paid like Kittle's getting paid. He's not getting paid by the Eagles the way Kittle is, and they have Dallas Goedert waiting in the wings as well, who's also injured at the moment. So look, I can see how the injuries won't come back in time, and I just looking at the teams who are going to make the playoffs, you feel like any of those are capable of falling over, and maybe that's something we can get into in the Pick Six, which is time for now.
These puns definitely all make sense. It's the Pick Six on OTB Sports.
Yeah, it might strike people as counterintuitive that we seem to hone in on the NFC least, which we coined it a few weeks ago, but we start with the Dallas Criers Club, Ger, which the Dallas Cowboys have had their problems this year, and some of them of their own making. Obviously, the Dak Prescott one, not included in that. Nobody can really account for that. Virgil van Dijk-esque, basically torpedo to your season. But for the first time, Kenyan Drake has his own slot in this Pick Six later on. So we're actually going to focus on the Cowboys side of Monday Night Football, which was pretty dramatic. Jane Slater reported that the Cowboys players initially bought into keeping things internal. This is their grievances with Mike McCarthy. Now, as they sit 2-4, the discontent is leaking out on the coaching staff. They say totally unprepared. They don't teach. They don't have any sense of adjusting on the fly. And others said they just aren't that good at their jobs. So the players have taken, 6 weeks? Like, fair play to them for keeping it in-house for 5 weeks. But after 6 weeks, there's mutiny in the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not going to lie, this looked like a pretty bad hire at the time. The fact that Mike McCarthy managed to win or get to one Super Bowl with the most talented quarterback in history is kind of an indictment of his coaching ability, in my opinion. But the fit, Jerry Jones just fell in love with Mike McCarthy. There was an argument to be made that maybe they didn't need someone just with their head screwed on to get the best out of this group. But you look at that defense and it's just absolutely putrid. And you talked about players getting healthy, and they are getting a little bit more healthy on that side of the ball. But one of the players came out earlier in the season saying you can't expect us to try 100% on every down. And that was after week 3. So I think that speaks to the culture that is already endemic in the Dallas Cowboys.
Why not? Sorry, the point being that we're not going anywhere, so why would we try?
No, he was saying that the nature, the high intensity, high octane nature of the NFL is that you can't be expected to give 100% on every single down. I think it was Xavier Woods that said it, but it was off the back of he didn't chase down a run out of bounds or something like that, and just look, the optics were terrible. But he was saying after the game that I can't be expected to give my all on every down, which I think is the bare minimum for a professional athlete, Jared. I don't know if you agree with that, but it's the kind of thing you would not hear coming out of the Ravens or the Patriots or the Chiefs. It's just, it's a bad sign. It's a sign of culture. And the fact that they were linked heavily with Earl Thomas, at least they didn't go that route, because that would have bbeen the final exclamation point on this whole thing. But the Cowboys, to your point at the start of the show, are very much still in this. They can very easily beat everyone else in this division. And Andy Dalton, granted, he didn't get off to the greatest start on Monday, but he's competent enough. And if push came to shove, Carson Wentz was good last night, but when they're at their best, you just don't know if there's a huge amount between them. But this division is entertaining for all the wrong reasons, basically.
I was saying to you, Cian, on Twitter that they should trade for Fitzmagic. I mean, why not?
Because he's Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Come on.
Have you watched his career?
Is he not better than Andy Dalton at this stage?
He might be, but it's not going to make a difference. Like, this part of the reason Dak Prescott is so good and why Dak Prescott needs to be paid and why the Cowboys treating him like he's an average replaceable quarterback was always insulting. He has covered for so many problems in Dallas. One of the interesting aspects of watching that game was over the course of the coverage of the broadcast, the ESPN booth I went from talking about Dalton coming in and solidifying the offense and actually helping. Like Tony Dungy literally said it, this helps the team. And they were talking about how the Cowboys are talented enough and good enough and how they can be the winners of the NFC East. And then you saw over the course of the game, Elliott had 2 fumbles. The defense was a disaster and he couldn't do anything they needed to do. The offensive line collapsed on Dalton every single play. And the narrative changed to, oh, well, Dalton never had a chance. This is not on him. This isn't his fault. But I was sat there going, that's exactly how this Cowboys team has played all year. Like, that's the second game that Ezekiel Elliott has fumbled twice in. This isn't the first time the offensive line has completely collapsed on every play. The defense has given up 40 points pretty much every week, except since week 1. So, like, this team wasn't built to carry Dak. It wasn't a team that was built to carry Dalton. It's a team that needs a great quarterback just to be average. And I actually won't be surprised if they don't win another game this year, because I think most of their performance is going to look like what it looked like on Monday night. Jalen Smith is running around the place, an absolute disaster, has no idea where he's supposed to be, seemingly, does not have the athleticism to cover for all of his mistakes. Most of the Cardinals' early production was a reflection on where Jalen Smith was being out of position, or Jalen Smith wasn't reading the reason to play properly. Christian Kirk's first touchdown, Jalen Smith found out where the ball was when Kirk was in the end zone. He was blocking, or he was fighting a block of the left guard or the right guard, looking in the opposite direction as Kirk ran through the pylon. So this defense is a disaster. And if we want to talk about the coaching, I don't really feel it's necessary to harp on with that we knew what Mike McCarthy is, because all of us knew this. It was something that, like, we saw coming. We knew this was going to be Jason Garrett 2.0. But if we want to actually look at a specific and see something that should be better than it is and something that can be tied directly to the coaching staff, Trayvon Diggs, the rookie cornerback they brought in, who's kind of taking over Byron Jones's role, he has shown an incredible amount of talent. He has shown an incredible amount of positives. But every single week he's made major errors, major mental errors, major technique errors, and just been beaten for big plays. And a good coaching staff would look at him and go, hey, this is the reason this happened. This is the reason this happened. You can prevent this from happening again by doing this, this, and this, and we can actually get the best out of you and show you how you can make the most out of your quality play that you're showing off as well. And that simply hasn't happened. Like, they're just making the same mistakes over and over and over again, and nothing's being addressed. So while I'm generally kind of skeptical sometimes of players speaking out, because you don't know if it's coming from a disgruntled player, you don't know if it's coming from someone who's just unhappy, this seems pretty widespread in the locker room, and this seems to be evidence backed up. Okay, if they don't win another game this season, then they are suddenly in the stakes for the greatest quarterback of all time, who's coming out next year. It's always the same way these things work. Is that a possibility? Might they go that way? Is it are they suddenly in the sweepstakes? We have to assume so, considering the way they've talked about Dak and the reluctance they've got with Dak. And to be honest, that would be the best thing for Dak. You know, the Cowboys have incredible wide receivers, but that's about it. If you get Dak to another team, like we've talked previously about him being the 49ers' next quarterback, that would be ideal. But if you get him to the next team, and if you get him to the open market, that's just huge money. And the Cowboys, well, they can just ruin another quarterback, I guess. Okay, so what's next?
Yeah, number 2, Jared, Bucks, the trend, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are trending up. I think most people were a little bit disappointed with their start to the season, a little bit so. Granted, they did a difficult start with the Saints, and it didn't quite pick up to high gear straight away, but that was sort of a must-win game, or at least a must-show-up game against the Packers, and they certainly did that. It didn't necessarily look like it in the first few minutes, the Packers going 10-0 up, but they had to work for those 10 points, and if you actually watch the game back, there were some pointers to maybe the Packers' frustration, which turned into a bit of a whooping in the end. But all the talk in the offseason, and justifiably so given his profile, was, can Tom Brady be the old Tom Brady in Tampa Bay? Can he get back to that level and take them to the Super Bowl? When in reality, he was a supporting character the other night. He didn't really... It was the defense which did the thing, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or the Glazers in general, probably the only good thing they've ever done is that defense in the early 2000s with Sapp and John Lynch and co, and it looks like they've managed to put together something similar here, because that defense looked tremendous against the Packers and was fairly good last year as well, if not better. And I know James Winston took a lot of the flack for not getting them into the playoffs and the 30 for 30 touchdown interception ratio and all that went with that, but that kind of did overshadow the proficiency of this defense, and they stood up in a big way. Like basically 2 pick sixes. The first one obviously a pick six, and the second one was all but a pick six, given that it got to the goal line more or less. So that shows if they can score on defense and Tom Brady just keeps things taking over in a non-Jameis Winston-like manner. And even Rob Gronkowski was rolling back the years with some play designs that I thought were out of the Gronk playbook, that little fade from one side of the field to the other for the touchdown, and even some clutch catches in the middle of the field. So even if he can appear in spots, like he's a playoff player. So if if he can turn up later in the season, they've got all the pieces here to win a Super Bowl. There's no doubt about it.
I did think all the stuff about Gronkowski being so skinny, like he's going to get up to speed slowly over a period of time, having taken a year off to rest his body. But he was an absolutely sensational athlete, and maybe the back is so bad and he never recovers from it, but there's also a possibility that year's rest is exactly what he needs, and in the second half of the season he begins to get match sharp. And I think Cian, people probably underestimated that a little bit.
Yeah, I think probably I did, but I think the key detail with Gronk, it looks more like he's changed as a player. Like he is very clearly skinnier. He is very clearly a different type of player. So I think he's probably going to contribute more as a receiver and a blocker. And if you go through his stats for the season as a whole, he hasn't been a big part of the offense so far. He's carrying out a smaller role. And I think that's the important detail, really, because if you go to that game, Ronan's right, the defense was really, really good, and it was really impressive that they did that without Vita Vea, who they lost the previous week. Like defensively, they were outstanding, and the game really turned once that first pick six. It just completely collapsed on the Packers, which is kind of a tendency for the Packers too, where if they get down early, they just stay down and lose the game early. They kind of give up. But if you go back to the offense, Ronald Jones has really merged into a high-quality player, and he's carried the offense a little bit. Like Brady was very much a compliment. He wasn't. The game had nothing to do with him, really. The only thing he could have done in that game was to throw it away. So you had Ronald Jones there playing really well. You had Gronk played well. And then you actually looked at the offense and you saw Brady didn't do much. Chris Godwin didn't do much. Mike Evans didn't do much.
Yeah.
And they had the pieces. Like, so there's some quality depth there.
So wasn't that the whole preseason argument, though, that if you don't throw 30 interceptions and you just hand the ball off to somebody who is good in the run game, then this defense, allied to whenever you do need to throw it 15, 20 times a game, then suddenly it's a playoff team who is a contender in January and February.
Yeah, 100%. And the Packers haven't been good against the run all year, and that's kind of a big issue. That's a matchup problem that I probably should have foreseen, that I didn't foresee last week. I thought the Packers were coming in there as the better team. But if you can stop the run, then you can put pressure on Brady, which we saw with the Bears game the prior week. So there's very much a matchup issue with the Buccaneers, and that trails back to the offensive line where Donovan Smith can't block anyone. So if you can force Brady to actually go and win the game for them, it might be a little bit tougher, which is a weird thing to say, even at Tom Brady's age, and even though he's in a new scenario.
Yeah, and look, that division is actually going to be really hard. That's the one thing that might slow them down a little bit, and there'll be games where they get knocked off by the Panthers and potentially the Falcons later on as well. Okay, so what's number 3 for us?
2 becomes 1, Ger, and you'd have seen on the news this week, there has been a lot of emotion around a Dolphin who's just been absent from his home, or what he's come to call home, and that Dolphin is Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was pretty heartbroken. And I think at the time this was seen as a very, very astute move to maybe change quarterback midstream when things are going well. You know, in the Premier League it's always said, or in football generally, like buy when you're strong. And rather than changing quarterback when the house is on fire, maybe do it when there's actually, number 1, a chance to get into the playoffs, and number 2, actually give Tua a chance to win from the jump rather than getting him into five fires, as I was saying. But I was actually pretty taken back by Ryan Fitzpatrick's comments. He said, I was shocked by it. This is speaking to Armando Salguero in the Miami Herald. It definitely caught me off guard. It was a hard thing for me to hear yesterday, just digesting the news. My heart hurt all day. I basically got fired, and today my day consisted of Zoom meetings with the guy that fired me and sitting in a room with the guy who replaced me for 4 hours. So that's poor Ryan Fitzpatrick, who actually has been sort of a meandering soul and found a home in Miami. People will be forever grateful for what he did to the Patriots last season. But it's Tua time in Miami, Ger, and I, for one, as a neutral and observer looking in, I'm pretty excited about this because, as I said, this is such a well-coached team, and with young talent around and some veteran leadership as well. And to just drop Tua in, who, for me, as a not as keen a follower of college football, but just the games I've seen of Tua versus Joe Burrow, he was the more eye-catching, explosive guy, and I was always excited to see how he would do as a pro. The injury almost derailed it, but the fact that he's going to land on his feet in a very good situation, I think everybody's excited to see how they get on next week.
Yeah, Cian, there's a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. There's a coach who certainly seemed to prove his chops last year when all around him was trying to lose games and he was busy winning games and keeping them in matches against far superior teams. So it's a good scenario for Tua to come into. What type of quarterback is he?
So in college, Alabama had the spread offense where they use his, first of all, we have to look at the receivers there at Alabama because Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs, we're seeing what these guys are doing in the NFL. These are high-end receivers. So in college, they gave him a huge advantage from the get-go. And they had a spread offense, which was a big change for Nick Saban, and that was kind of a big deal. And Tua was the first high-end quarterback that he got, and Tua replaced Jalen Hurts, who was pretty good himself. But Tua is very, very accurate quarterback, a very good athlete, not a great athlete. He can play outside the pocket. He can play inside the pocket. He has a good feel for the pocket. The question marks for me were, what's his decision-making going to be like when he's breaking down coverages, and is he going to get the ball out fast enough? The Dolphins might be able to offset that a little bit and get they might be able to take more deep shots with Devontae Parker and Preston Williams and work the ball a little bit more in a running game more easily with him there rather than Fitzpatrick. I think I'm really intrigued by Tua. I'm really interested in him. My biggest concern really was that he was injured, so the injury seems to be not a problem. I have been kind of bothered by the whole narrative of Fitzpatrick this week.
Yeah, you are haters going to hate here, Cian. You've been unleashing bile on poor Fitzpatrick all week.
Well, actually, I like Fitzpatrick. It's the media coverage that's just turned into complete nonsense. Like when he stepped aside, all the stuff was, Ryan, like Adam Schefter literally has a tweet where there's not a better quarterback to learn from and grow under than Ryan Fitzpatrick. There's also not a better quarterback to help out a quarterback who replaced him. Can we look at the list of quarterbacks Ryan Fitzpatrick has played with?
But that's not his fault.
Is going against history.
No.
Yes.
You're saying there's cause and effect, right? You're saying that all the quarterbacks were all rubbish who replaced him simply because bad management picked quarterbacks. I don't think there's cause and effect there. He might have been very nice to those guys. He might have made them better players. We don't know.
I'm agreeing with you that there's no cause and effect, but this is the problem. People are assuming that Tua is better off, and there's no evidence that he's better off. Like, Josh Rosen wasn't better off. Jameis Winston wasn't. Christian Hackenberg, Bryce Petty, Ryan Mallett, Tom Savage, Jake Locker. None of these guys benefited in the way that we're talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick benefiting, or Ryan Fitzpatrick's backups benefiting. So I don't understand where this comes from.
Are you assuming they didn't benefit because they were all crap? Is that what you're assuming?
I'm assuming there was no notable difference. There was no evidence to say that he develops quarterbacks. It's the same thing with Josh McCown.
Well, let's see. Okay, it's possible. But, I mean, I'm not going to blame Tua being crap on Fitzpatrick if he ends up being crap. Or if he's good, I'm probably not going to give Fitzpatrick too much credit for that either.
Yeah,
what do you feel? What do you think about the way those quotes, though? Like, even if you feel that way, is that something you necessarily say to put...
I don't know.
Extra pressure on your colleague, like to Cian's point, like that does not strike me as a good partnership.
Well, if Tua can't take that, then his pretty little shoulders ain't going to last too long in the NFL.
But
it doesn't matter.
It just flies totally in the face of this holier than thou Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Oh yeah. It's
almost immediately.
But he's a tremendous competitor, right? Tremendous competitor.
Harvard graduate.
It's a bad thing, but I don't think it actually matters. I think it's something that often would get picked up and turned into a bigger thing. And ironically, it's not being that. It's the opposite right now.
I'm watching highlights of Tua here. It's pretty good. The old lefty thing is like, that's class. It looks way cooler.
Being a left-handed quarterback is like when someone scores a screamer and it goes in off the crossbar. It just looks better, even if it's not actually better.
Yeah. Also, Ruggs and Jeudy. Whoa, that's not bad. That's cheat code stuff.
And the third receiver, I can't remember the name of the third receiver there, but he was pretty good too. If you're a Dolphins fan, you're usually excited, and you're right to be usually excited. Like, I've wasted most of the segment talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick. But Tua has high-end ability. My concern with him is the offensive line in front of him isn't particularly good, and the game is going to be so fast for him because it's a completely different thing. It's something he's coming into late without a preseason, without kind of being eased in. I'm surprised they're starting him now. I think it was probably predetermined they were going to start him now. But I thought a Jets game might be the best way to do it.
I think the fact that he hasn't had a preseason, but all these games here have been an opportunity for him to at least get a feel for what it's going to be like and be there on match day. And even however the few snaps he played last time, he's not as good an athlete as Colin Murray, is he?
No, he's not. He's probably close to Daniel Jones in the sense that he can run, but it's not going to be something you build into the offense. It's not like a Josh Allen where we saw with the Bills this week, and we've seen it over recent weeks. They have recognized that Josh Allen's running ability is one of his biggest keys to success. So they're actually calling designed runs for him. You wouldn't really do that for Tua. I think they will, but I don't think they should.
Was the Daniel Jones, Devin? Go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say it is actually problematic and something to keep an eye on, that athleticism, because I think in his own mind he's quicker than he actually is in his mind.
Aren't we all?
So he tries to escape from situations that he doesn't have the Lamar Jackson type fleet of foot to do so, and it's something we see with Baker Mayfield, who seems to think he's like a track star when he's in the pocket. It's like, no. Baker, forget about that, pal. You're going to get badly hurt if you keep doing it. So similarly for Tua, and it's actually the reason he got injured. I think hopefully he'll be wise for that. But yeah, his arm is great, and as you said, the optics are great. Wonderful left-hander.
Did they win a national championship with him and Judy and Ruggs? Did they not?
I believe so. I'm the wrong person to ask in college football.
Okay, I don't know either. Joe Burrow won last year.
Because Clemson, Trevor Lawrence was undefeated until that most recent championship, so I assume Clemson won.
But so LSU won last year with Joe Burrow, right?
Yeah, and then the year before would have been Clemson.
Okay. Right, what's next?
Number 4, Willing and Vrabel. So no practice, no problem for the Tennessee Titans. Mossy Quinn's Tennessee Titans, who are on an absolute tear if you take into account what they did at the end of last year. Even the playoffs, they were so impressive beating the Ravens, and were impressive thereafter, closed the season so strong. They did an absolute number on the Patriots, Tom Brady's last ever game over there. So the Titans, with 2 MVP candidates, if you want to look at like that term, is so arbitrary. Like Russell Wilson's going to win it because that's the narrative that's been built up around it, and Aaron Rodgers similarly, if he can win the majority of his games, they're dying to give it to him. But if you actually look at the numbers, who's more important to their team than Derrick Henry, or who's more important to their team than Ryan Tannehill? Like, those two lads have been so good. And Vrabel, out of this Belichick coaching tree, which has been withering ever since it started spreading up, given that nobody of any sort of reputation has actually been built from the Belichick school. But Vrabel's kind of putting paid to that, because he obviously, number one, he out Belichick in that game I was talking about in the playoffs with some shrewd moves. And then what he did this week just gone was so clever. And I don't know, if it was anyone else, you'd think it was a mistake, but because it's him, it's intentional, that he had the 12 men on the field to stop the clock and gave him that extra portion of time at the end of the game, where they managed to maneuver themselves into position to ultimately win that game, which kept them undefeated and was a key divisional win. So the Titans, we talked about the Steelers last week, but the Titans are the story coming into this week. And this is somebody's always got to go. And as Cian touched on at the top, this is just an incredible weekend of matchups. So that's very much top of the pile.
This is the best matchup of the weekend, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. And it's not just having two unbeaten teams going against each other. It's the fascinating aspect of the matchup here, because Taylor Lewan is now out for the year. He tore his ACL. He's a key piece of their running game. And he's also a key piece just in the sense that the Titans don't have the offensive tackle quality they had last year. Dennis Kelly has played a bit of right tackle because the first-round pick they brought in didn't really pan out early. He had some issues with COVID a couple of times, and he had a couple of discipline issues, I guess is the best way to off the field is to describe it, because it wasn't anything serious, but it was not following rules. And then on the other side, you've got Devin Bush, who is a key middle linebacker for the Steelers, who is out for the year with a torn ACL himself. So the matchup there is really fascinating, because one thing's got to win out. The running game is going to have to work against the front seven that's been the best run defense in the league this year without one of its key pieces. Ger, I know I heard you talking about playing tennis this week, and the best way to describe Devin Bush's absence from the Steelers is if you can serve overhand in tennis, it's a completely different thing to serving underhand in tennis, because you can generate that power and speed and spin. The Steelers have kind of lost their overhand serve this week because they just have nobody who can do the things that Devin Bush can do. They're going to have to look at trading for a guy like Miles Jack eventually. I think it's going to be exploited a lot this week because Derrick Henry had over 200 yards for the third time in his career last week, and a big key to Derrick Henry's day was the inside linebackers of the Texans being out of position and not being fast enough to match him once he hit the hole. So it's a fascinating matchup. How much Taylor Lewan's absence lets Bud Dupree take over, how much Devin Bush's absence lets Derrick Henry take over. One of those things has got to win out.
All right, what do you think is going to happen? Pick it.
I'm taking the Steelers just because I think the tackles will be a bigger problem than the linebacker.
Okay, all right. What's next?
Number 5, Drake it till you make it. And as I mentioned at the top, Kenyan Drake is getting his light today because Arizona Cardinals, all of a sudden, a very glitzy team. Everybody loves them. Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins et al. And Kyler Murray had a bit of a Jimmy Garoppolo-esque game the other day where he only threw 9 completed passes, and it was actually Kenyan Drake who literally ran away with the game for the Cardinals against, as we mentioned, a deplorably bad or badly coached Dallas defense. But Kenyan Drake, we talk about coaching, and we've talked about coaching today, but it was actually Kenyan Drake's mother who got this thing on the road. She rang him up and said, "Hey son, you got to hit some holes today." And he said, "It kind of just lit a fire under me. I was ready to go out there and play ball. It kind of really hit home when your own mom is not liking what she sees out there." So well done Mama Drake, who got Kenyan Drake motoring the other day. And if they can get that complementary run game going, we've seen how dangerous Kyler Murray is running. I don't know, to Keane's point on designed runs for quarterbacks, he seems to be very good at freelancing and just, if he doesn't see anything open, just getting out of bounds, and he always seems to pick up the first down. So the Cardinals, again, a very dangerous proposition. And this, if Steelers-Titans is the best game of the weekend, this is probably right there with it. The Cardinals against the Seahawks, who I was talking about Russell Wilson on this MVP tear, and he certainly is. There's no disputing that. But their defense, which was the hallmark of this franchise since Pete Carroll got there and maybe before, has been really bad. And I know they've been missing some personnel, but it looks like they've been putting the ball in Russell Wilson's hands more, and it seems to be by design, but it also by necessity, because they find themselves needing to put up big scores in the way Dak Prescott almost does in Dallas. So this promises to be, given the ingredients at play, a bit of a fireworks encounter, and this is another one for people to keep an eye on.
They're the only unbeaten team as it stands in the NFC, the Seahawks that is, and it looks like they're about to get some cavalry. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what about the Cardinals, and what about Kenyan Drake? Do you expect Kenyan Drake to use this as the start of something? Because he's been a very slow starter into the season so far, given that this was somebody who they paid a lot of money to.
Yeah, I was going to say, did that phone call come midway through the fourth quarter? Because he was struggling through most of that game until he broke off the big play at the end when they were running clock and the Cowboys overcommitted. I would not be optimistic about Kenyan Drake moving into this week, because the Seahawks defense, while lacking big names and while lacking pass rushers, the one thing they're pretty good at is stopping the run. So it's going to be a mismatch for the in the Seahawks' favor, whereas last week it was a mismatch in the Cardinals' favor against the Cowboys. This is a very, very interesting game because, like you mentioned, rightly mentioned, that Kyler Murray's passing hasn't been up to scratch, and it's been a struggle all season long. Like, he was a much better passer last year than he's been this year, which is the opposite of what you expect with a rookie going into his second year, especially when you add a key piece like DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins was largely absent from that game against the Cowboys, which he should have been more heavily involved. You can't really complain on certain plays because Christian Kirk was obviously going off, but this week, you would expect the Hopkins to get open a lot. He's going against a couple of cornerbacks who aren't especially good. He's going against a defense as a whole that isn't especially good against the pass. And the biggest weakness the Cardinals have is their offensive tackles. And if you can exploit their offensive tackles, you'll be able to shut down their passing game. But the Seahawks famously don't have defensive ends. They've got very limited defensive ends. LJ Collier is probably their best one, and he's been mostly a bust after being picked in the first round. So if the offensive tackles hold up like we expect them to, this becomes a very, very interesting game. The biggest concern for the Cardinals is that Kyler might throw the game away, but defensively they've been getting better each week. The Seahawks are obviously exceptionally good, but they haven't been as consistent in recent games as they were at the start of the year. So like we mentioned, this is a great game. This is the one that got flexed to the late game because of the Raiders situation with COVID. So you might not be able to watch it. It might be too late for you, but if you have the opportunity to, it's definitely going to be worth it.
How late is it going to be on? Is it like super late?
Well, it's the Sunday Night Football game. They just swapped.
But it's Bank Holiday Monday, Cian.
Oh, I don't know these things. I've worked.
There you go. I've just remembered it's Bank Holiday Monday. I was like, oh, this is not going to be able. It's not going to play out well. I've literally just remembered it this second. So wow.
Also,
Go on.
Can I point out, I love the fact that Ronan is now using Jimmy Garoppolo as an insult. I think I've infected this show.
Listen, no. To be fair, I was talking about that. Was it the game against the Packers where he just handed the ball off for the whole game to Mostert and...
Where Mostert set a record for playoff game number of yards and they actually didn't need to do anything else because...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what the crack
also
was.
Also the playoff game against the Vikings.
That was the Cardinals the other day. All Kyler just had to do was run out of bounds every now and then, give it to Kenyan Drake. Job's a good one.
Jimmy G's going to dissect his old buddies this weekend, and you all going to put some respect on his name after this. What's the last one for us?
Yeah, number 6, Yannick Bye, and we're getting to that time of the season where the trade deadline approaches, and a lot of teams are panicking. One of them is not the Baltimore Ravens, who have just been Eric DaCosta, if you'll indulge me, like having taken over from the greatest GM in history, is doing a phenomenal job so far.
Why don't you marry him, Ronan? Go on, marry him. Propose now.
So don't be jealous, Ger. He's amazing. Like these acquisitions, like what happened last year, and my number one concern, and Des Bryant isn't necessarily going to allay it. He's on the practice squad now, but these throws outside the numbers that Lamar just hasn't had open to him when they fall behind. All I wanted was some sort of big body outside where he can, put up a contestable catch and maybe get the Ravens motor and get back in the game. Otherwise, it's like precise passes over the middle, or he has to run himself back into the game, and we've seen that's just not going to be achievable, not at the moment anyway. But they've addressed that one. But more to the point, the Titans ran roughshod over them in the playoffs last year, and basically all their acquisitions have been basically to address that issue. So we've seen Wolf come in, Calais Campbell has come in, and now Yannick Ngakoue is not for that specific role, but he'll be able to get after the quarterback, and it all meshes together. And this is the AFC division, or this is the AFC Championship front line that the Jaguars almost took the Patriots all the way, or did take the Patriots all the way, and almost got to the Super Bowl with Calais Campbell and Ngakoue up front. And you look at this and think it didn't work out for Ngakoue at the Vikings, but he's actually on course to be the sack leader this year. He's got 5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles in a terrible Vikings team, or a team that's just not clicking at all. So I'm sure he's happy to get out of that situation to Maryland, where he's from, basically, or certainly grew up a large part of his life. So this is a really good fit for the Ravens, who you'll remember got Marcus Peters this time last year, and just seem to pounce on things that aren't necessarily overly obvious.
I don't understand. So Marcus Peters, it was somebody else they picked up for nothing. How much did Calais Campbell cost? I mean, he's 34, so maybe that's not that big a deal. But
Calais Campbell was like a fire sale from the Jags, which we were talking with the Jags pre-season, Ger, and we presumed they were tanking for Trevor the way they were going.
They are.
They got rid of all their leaders. Like they got rid of Calais Campbell. He wanted to stay. Yannick Ngakoue did his best to get out of there, no harm to him, so he's happy enough. But Calais Campbell was settled, like won the Walter Payton Man of the Year for stuff he had done in Florida, and was happy to stay there, and they bombed him out. So he's going to come back, and
tax situation in Florida.
He's had a really good season for the Ravens so far. But like, I don't want to focus entirely on the Ravens, because you mentioned Antonio Brown there, Ger, in the Seahawks conversation. That seems like the most likely destination for him to land, and
just what the Seahawks need at the moment.
Yeah, but like, they don't, like, their offense is actually so good anyway, and like
he's never is he actually an upgrade on Tyler Lockett? Is he an upgrade? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
yes.
Is he that much at this stage?
But like,
I mean, Antonio Brown was the best receiver in the NFL the last time he played.
Not really. The last time he played was last year. It was 3 seasons ago now. He was the best receiver in the NFL.
Oh, well, he's up there at least. I know Ronan wants to move past the Ravens, but I don't. I want to focus on this because what they've done is incredible. You asked what they paid for these players as a whole.
Nothing.
If you put Campbell, Peters, and Ngakoue together, it's a 3rd-round pick, 3 5th-round picks, and a backup linebacker. That's exceptional. Like, that's 3 players who can.
On Ngakoue, so they gave up a 3rd-round pick to get him, but if he leaves at the end of the season, which he could if he chooses to, they get a compensatory pick back for it. So basically, this is totally free. This is a shot to nothing, and a very much of a win-now move if it pays off for them.
They do. They get the value of him in the compensatory formula, which is a little bit different, but it's basically what you're saying. It depends on what they sign. The aspect of this that's fascinating to me is if you told a franchise to build a team around Lamar Jackson or build a team from nothing, transitioning away from Joe Flacco, you could not have done a better job than what the Ravens have done. They've gotten value trades. They've added guys at the perfect times in their career to elevate the young players around them. They've drafted and developed well. They've got a coaching and culture there that allow them to transition. We talked about the Cowboys culture being terrible. No one has any questions about John Harbaugh's control of that locker room. No one has any questions about what their role is on the team when given on each team. And then you look at the management of the cap, the management of the value in trades. Like they were players for Ngakoue at the start of the season. Now they've got him at a cut price, and he didn't play poorly in Minnesota. Minnesota is just in a point where they know they're not going to the playoffs, so they were looking to get value. Yeah, so the value for what the Ravens have done is incredible, but I have to go back to my broken record of the last couple of weeks and say this might all be irrelevant, because if Don Martindale continues to blitz, it won't matter that Yannick Yannick is there, because Ngakoue will have no value just occupying a blocker, hoping the blitz gets home. So if they are actually going to change now, they've got Ngakoue coming off the edge as a speed rusher. They've got Matt Judon working off the other side as a variable rusher that you can win in different ways. They've got Calais Campbell, who will play more inside now, who is still an incredible penetrating defensive tackle, incredibly destructive player. You have these three players, and you'll have a fourth, obviously, a Derek Wolfe, maybe, whoever rotates in and out depending on the situation. You have to just let those guys rush. Yeah, you can blitz Patrick Queen every so often, you can blitz Marlon Humphrey every so often, but the blitzing has to not be their identity anymore. They have to go back to playing coverage. You have to actually work towards being the Kansas City Chiefs and not just taking advantage of a Baker Mayfield who's going to fall for those blitzes. And again, if we talk about the Chiefs, if they hope for that rematch, the biggest weakness on the Chiefs, Eric Fisher at left tackle. If Yannick Ngakoue, who's a right side defensive end speed rusher, if you put him out there, just let him go to work with Eric Fisher for 4 quarters, the Chiefs' offense will get disrupted. If you don't do that, this trade is pointless.
All right, but at least this gives them the option for it now. So that's pretty much all we've got time for. I'm going to run you through the fixtures. As Cian said at the start, it is an amazing weekend of fixtures. So last night, the Eagles beat the Giants in a come-from-behind victory by a single point to now put them a half game ahead of the NFC least, as we've been calling it. The Buffalo Bills at the Jets. The Jets 0-6. There's a possibility they get some attacking talent back at the weekend. We might see Denzel Mims for the first time. That's exciting. Dallas Cowboys at Washington. By all accounts, this game's going to be absolutely horrific. But again, there's a lot riding on it. Detroit at Atlanta. Atlanta started to win last week. Maybe they should be trading away all their assets now so that the new coaching ticket and the new front office comes in and has lots of value, because if you start winning now, what's really the point? Carolina at the Saints, divisional game, huge. The Browns at the Bengals. Bengals should have won last week, couldn't get it done. Green Bay at Houston. Those Houston juicy first-round picks, they need to start winning some to make it look like not the complete bust that it was. But at least Laramie Tunstall started to work out. Steelers at the Titans, game of the weekend. Seattle at Arizona, one of the other games of the weekend. The Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos, an 8:25 kickoff. Jacksonville at the Chargers. That's actually interesting in terms of the quarterbacks and how Jacksonville really need one and the Chargers seem to have one. The Niners at the Patriots. That kickoff is 8:25. One of the other games of the weekend as well. Certainly to see exactly how Jimmy G can do against his old maestro. Tampa Bay at the Raiders kicks off at midnight, and then the Bears at the Rams kicks off 15 minutes past. Gents, a pleasure spending some time in your company. A great pick six this week. My thanks to both of you for being part of the show. We'll see you next week. Take care.
OTB's American Football Show, The Snap.